Hello and welcome to the Down Under Visa Philippines to Australia podcast series. I'm your host, Jeff Harvie, Registered Migration Agent with Down Under Visa, the premier Australian migration agents in Manila, Philippines, specialising in visas for Australian Filipina couples. We hope you enjoy this podcast and hope it proves useful to you. Please feel free to share this with your partner and with any of your interested friends. Let's get started. Now, today's podcast comes from the blog article Immigration Advice About Australian Visas from Philippines. Now, there are three broad sources of information and immigration advice about Australian visas and how to bring your Filipino lady to Australia either permanently or just for a visit. They are well-meaning friends, and there are no care, no responsibility forums and Facebook groups, and of course proper advice from registered migration agents. Now, given the fact that so much often rests on visa decisions and that people do get hurt, the Australian government decided a number of years ago to regulate the giving of advice about visa applications. It is illegal for anyone except registered migration agents to give immigration advice, in other words, advice about visas in Australia. Understand that. Illegal for anybody else. Now, exceptions are made for the following, as long as they don't charge a fee. Your spouse, parent, brother, sister, child, or adopted child, they may give you advice if they have something useful to offer. Your spouse or your nominator may give advice, and parliamentarians, either state or federal, and their staff may give advice. Members of diplomatic missions, consular posts, or international organisations, they may give advice, but nobody else is allowed to do so. Now, despite this being law, these rules are broken all the time, much to the detriment of the trusting souls who listen to the well-intentioned but invariably poorly informed advice. Taking a little bit of responsibility for the outcome and the fact that somebody may listen to my awful advice, but I don't know. It doesn't seem to be the practice in the age that we're in. At the moment, people seem to feel that if they have an opinion, therefore they are absolutely entitled to express that enthusiastically, whether they have anything to offer or not. I'll explain a bit more about the forums and the Facebook groups in a minute, but I don't tend to get involved in those myself these days. Years ago, I thought I popped onto a few of these. I thought, oh gee, I bet they'll be very appreciative to have a registered migration migration agent here giving some qualified advice. But no, they weren't actually. I found people arguing with me. I knew what I was talking about, they didn't, but they still argued with me. People who'd managed to get one visa, therefore they were entitled to advise others. But anyway, I'll keep going. Bad Australian visa and immigration advice. I won't touch on those who seek profit for poor advice on this occasion, even though there are plenty of opportunists and unqualified so-called agents out there. There's one thing migration agents really hate, is hearing somebody say an unregistered migration agent. It's like saying an unregistered doctor. They're not a doctor. And somebody is, you are either a migration agent or you are not. There's really no such thing as an unqualified migration agent or an unregistered migration agent. They're not a migration agent because they don't have the training, they don't have the skills. Maybe there are exceptions, but I don't believe any unqualified person offering visa advice and immigration advice in exchange for payments is unaware that they are providing poor value for money. They are motivated by greed and they don't care about the end results. Now, in this article, I'm concentrating on those who provide bad advice, but with the best of intentions. They lack the greed of the fake, in inverted commas, agents, but they can still unwittingly cause a great deal of damage. Now, friends and relatives and visa advice. Friends and relatives are normally on your side, absolutely. Yes, you can get your occasional, destructo relative or friend who, wants to bring you down over something petty, but it's not the usual thing, not at all. In the Philippines, of course, you have the crab mentality people who try to keep everybody down at the same level, who hate to see somebody succeeding. You do get that, and you get people who bear grudges and they would set you up for failure. But I mean, I would like to think that this is less common. I think most of the time people are honestly believing that they are helping a great deal. Relatives in the Philippines are well known for giving poor but enthusiastic advice. Now, older relatives, be they parents, aunties, older sisters, etc., their advice and assurance is actively sought out in most cases, and it's seen by those older relatives as their duty to provide wise advice. Now, what if they know absolutely nothing about the topic? Irrelevant. Saying sorry, but I haven't got a clue is never an option. So you will have 57-year-old Auntie Jing telling you, either Auntie Jing or Auntie Jing. You'll find both. Telling you that your Filipino fiancee something she knows absolutely nothing about, and you will find that your fiancee will listen to her because she's supposed to listen to older people. So be aware of that as being something that can and probably will happen. I think the dangers are fairly obvious. You pay a professional to give you advice based on facts and based on considerable experience and expertise. Now, stuffing this up with bad advice from somebody who knows nothing. Yeah, we've seen this lead to visa refusals when omissions of important information are made. As an Australian, you need to understand the cultural differences, but at the same time, you just can't go along with it. Relatives and friends in Australia, not quite the same. Aussies are far more likely to admit to a lack of knowledge. However, you will still no doubt get the, surely they can't mean type of comment from the well-meaning who think they're just being logical. Australian immigration does not always follow logical processes, sorry to say. But it's the experienced mate who's more likely to try to be helpful. He or she are the one who went through the partner visa process themselves, or tourist visa possibly, sometimes many years ago and maybe recently. They will sometimes be resentful if you have chosen to pay a professional when you could have relied on their great wisdom, and this may get mixed in with a genuine desire to help. I explain at the end an overall problem with receiving advice with anyone from a little bit of information only, but I'll move on. Visa advice forums and Facebook groups. Now, there are a plethora of these out there and they increase every day. Forums require knowledge of website making and a lot of work, but whereas anyone can make a Facebook group in about 30 minutes or so, every time you blink there's another group out there about Australian visas from Philippines where trusting souls ask questions and anyone with a thought process can answer and give advice. End result is that somebody walks away with often poor to dreadful advice, and this may affect their visa application if they choose to follow this. Now, look, we have our own Facebook group called Philippines to Australia. You look that up on Facebook, you'll find that. Now, it's there mainly to encourage down under visa clients to communicate with other Australian Filipino couples. It's always awash with visa grant notices and wedding photos and baby photos. A fairly happy place. It's free of trolls and pick-up lines, and anybody who gets on there and enjoys insulting people for the sake of it, they get removed fairly quickly. But we do get a few questions from prospective visa applicants too. They will get on there and fire out a question. and I not only insist on answering these myself, but I actively prevent other members from answering. I probably come across as a little draconian sometimes, but there is a reason for that, because sometimes a question goes on there, I'm busy, and I come back and I find 10 people have responded, and in the process 9 people have given sometimes quite damaging advice, and I end up having to remove people's comments. But I'd rather not do that, but I don't want to see any damage get done. That's the point. Now, questions about getting passports or best ways to send money to the Philippines, well look, they're entirely open to all, but anything that could be called migration advice is dealt with by a registered migration agent, in other words, me. And sometimes these questions do get away, as I said, giving me, the administrator, the unpleasant task of having to delete answers. It's frustrating because, I know absolutely, a lot of the, most of the members are current or former down under visa clients, and I do know them, and I do know that they're, without question, their intentions are honest and correct, but sometimes they're just plain wrong, and that's all there is about it. Now, visa advice for amateurs, what's the problem there? The problem is that a little bit of advice is dangerous. Most people who will give immigration advice on a forum have had one successful visa application. They may have had a partner visa grant, possibly a couple of tourist visa grants. You don't get too many people on the do-it-yourself visas group who can say, well, yes, I did 30 partner visa applications for my wife, so I'm something of an old hand here. Experience for most forum users is one application only. And worst of all, as I mentioned before, it's that no care, no responsibility situation you find yourself in if you take poor advice. A bit of a problem in the age that we live in, where everybody considers their advice quality to be equal to the level of the enthusiasm in which it is given. I believe in this absolutely, so therefore I'm correct, and people should follow me. If you feel strongly enough, then you have the right to encourage others to follow you. Forget about the facts. This applies to both well-meaning friends and to forums and Facebook groups. It doesn't take much to become a well-known expert. This is one of the shortcomings of the internet, and the easier it becomes to make these things, well then the more damage can be done. As I said, anybody can make a Facebook group. It can take you 30 minutes, and as long as you speak confidently and keep repeating yourself and consistently saying the same things, next thing you know, you will have people who will be following you. Bit of a buzz, I suppose, but again, a lot of damage can be done. Registered migration agent like down under visa. Well, look, we've done hundreds and sometimes thousands of Australian visa application types, where we average of 700 plus visa applications every year after year. We're also university educated, and we are registered and regulated by a code of conduct, and we have access to the latest legislation. We also have a fairly large core of colleagues who we communicate with all the time. So, and we've seen most problems and issues. The insurmountable problem you come to us with, well, we've usually seen it hundreds of times before. People will say, oh look, I'm really, really worried, I've got a very serious issue here. And then they're amazed when I come up with a workable answer within a few minutes, because I've generally seen it before. That's the point. But again, and as many will attest, you come to me with something completely new, and you will hear, sorry, but I've never come across that before. Let me do some research and get back to you. A good professional doesn't experiment on their clients. That's the point. Okay, thank you very much, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye. Well, that brings us to the end of another episode of the Down Under Visa Philippines to Australia podcast series. Thank you very much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed, and we hope you found this useful. Australian visas from the Philippines are not easy, and the outcome matters, as you well know. Please feel free to contact us anytime if you need some further help. And we look forward to talking to you again next time. Bye-bye.